relationship builder. Not alone. Lonely. There's a difference. Alone is empty rooms. Lonely is full rooms where no one sees you. Here's the part that keeps her up at night. She didn't do anything wrong. She was warm, she smiled, she asked questions. The lie isn't that dating apps don't work. Not liked, not validated, seen. She went quiet for a long time. The amber glow of downtown LA was doing its best impression of magic hour as I sat across from my friend Sarah at that overpriced coffee spot on 7th and Flower. You know the one. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, oat milk surcharge. She'd just come from a third date. A good one, she said. A real one. Now she was scrolling, unlocking, locking, unlocking again. Her thumb moved like it had its own nervous system. Her glass of Sancerre had sweated a perfect ring onto the copy of The Happiness Trap, sitting next to her elbow. Her phone screen lit up her face in that specific blue that somehow makes everyone look like they're waiting for news they already know is coming. He said he'd text, she said, not looking up. He said he had a really nice time. I watched her refresh her messages 3 times in 11 seconds. Her Apple Watch buzzed. Stand goal achieved. She hadn't stood in 2 hours. Sarah is 32. She runs marketing for a sustainable fashion brand that just raised a Series B. Her LinkedIn says she's a relationship builder. Her Instagram shows her laughing at private event openings in Venice and book launches in the Arts District. She has 840.7 connections on LinkedIn and 1,432 followers on Instagram. And right now, in this Brentwood apartment that costs $3,400 a month, she was the most connected, lonely person I'd ever seen. This isn't a story about dating apps. Everyone's already written that one. This is about something stranger, something that started quietly around 2021 and has now, 5 years later, become the unspoken epidemic of every urban professional between 25 and 40. We didn't lose our social skills. We had them stolen. And the theft was so gradual, so normalized, we didn't even notice it happening. Think back to 2019. Remember how you used to just sit in a conference room, at a bar, in someone's living room, not performing, not optimizing, just existing in the same physical space as other humans, absorbing their rhythms, their speech patterns, their pauses. You learned to read a room the way you learned to breathe, without a manual. Then 2020 hit. The scaffolding vanished. For 3 years, your primary social apprenticeship was conducted through screens. You learned when to unmute. You mastered the art of the timely Slack reaction. You developed an almost supernatural ability to interpret tone from 3 dots and a poorly lit Zoom square. These are real skills. They're just not the ones your body needs now. A 2025 Gallup study found that 46% of urban professionals aged 25 to 34 report feeling lonely even when they're physically surrounded by people. Not alone. Lonely. There's a difference. Alone is empty rooms. Lonely is full rooms where no one sees you. Here's what that looked like for Sarah last month. She went to this thing in Malibu, a private listening session at some compound off PCH, 40 people, music supervisors, A&R reps, producers, a few faces she recognized from the Grammy nomination parties. Her professional network had gotten her in the door. Her actual presence got her the kitchen. She spent 47 minutes leaning against a quartz countertop, scrolling her phone, pretending to be deeply interested in the waterfall island. She watched other people circulate. She watched them touch elbows, share jokes, exchange numbers. She had 3 separate conversations about how great the lighting was. She left at 9:12 p.m. No numbers, no follow-ups, no stories to tell her therapist except the one about how she was the most qualified person in that room to be there, and also the most invisible. Here's the part that keeps her up at night. She didn't do anything wrong. She was warm, she smiled, she asked questions. She did everything the articles tell you to do. She put herself out there. She sat at the bar. She went to the thing. And she still came home to a dark apartment and an unanswered text. The other week, Sarah ran into this entertainment lawyer she knows. Silver Fox, always sits at the front of networking events, always seems to leave with someone's number or someone's trust. He's 38. He's been doing this since before the apps took over. She asked him, half joking, what his secret was. He looked at her for a beat too long. "You keep trying to be remembered," he said. "I'm just trying not to be forgettable. There's a difference, and most people never figure out what it is." She laughed and changed the subject. She's thought about it every Tuesday night since. Here's the statistic that actually broke my brain. A December 2025 survey from XFun, the social analytics platform, found that 42% of active users on mainstream dating apps are already in relationships, not single, not seeing where things go, actually partnered. They're not there to meet someone. They're there because the apps have become a kind of ambient social insurance, a background process running at all times, just in case. You're not competing with other singles. You're competing with someone's contingency plan. You're competing with the dopamine architecture of apps specifically designed to keep people swiping past the moment of actual connection. The lie isn't that dating apps don't work. The lie is that digital visibility and interpersonal magnetism are the same skill. They're not. And the gap between them is where your late 20s and early 30s have been quietly disappearing. I asked Sarah to do something uncomfortable. I asked her to describe the last time she felt truly, deeply, unmistakably seen by another person. Not liked, not validated, seen. She went quiet for a long time. So why do I keep walking into rooms and walking out invisible? This is the part where you expect the therapist to say something about confidence, about putting yourself out there, about practicing more. She didn't. Instead, Diane leaned forward slightly, and said something that would undo Maya's entire understanding of herself over the next 6 months. "What if you didn't lose your social skills?" she said. "What if you just never finished learning them? Here's what nobody told the class of 2020 through 2025. For thousands of years, humans learned social skills the same way they learned to walk. Not from books, not from courses, from proximity, from osmosis, from being in the room with people who were slightly better at it than you, watching them fail and recover, absorbing their rhythms the way a child absorbs language. You didn't get good at conversation by reading about it. You got good by sitting through 1,000 boring meetings. You got good by enduring the 17 seconds of silence after someone said something awkward. You got good by watching a senior colleague disagree with a client without burning the bridge. You got good by being physically present over and over until the choreography became part of your muscle memory. Then 2020 happened, and that entire scaffolding collapsed. Not slowly, not gradually, overnight. A 2025 study from Stanford's Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences did something fascinating. They took fMRI scans of hybrid workers born between 1990 and 1997 and compared them to pre-2020 scans of the same demographic. The difference was stark. The threat detection regions of the brain, the amygdala, the anterior cingulate cortex, were hyperlit during social interactions. The social reward regions, the ventral striatum, the medial orbitofrontal cortex, were significantly dimmer. Your brain literally learned that other people are a threat. Not because they are, because for 3 years, every in-person interaction came with a risk assessment. Is this space ventilated? How close are they standing? Should we be doing this? Your nervous system was trained for a battlefield, and now someone's telling you to dance. This isn't a failure of character. It's a failure of environment. Here's what Maya didn't realize until Diane pointed it out. Maya's social apprenticeship didn't stop in 2020. It just changed platforms. She learned to read tone from Slack messages. She developed an almost supernatural ability to interpret the emotional subtext of sounds good versus sounds good versus sounds good. She mastered the art of the timely GIF. She could write an email that landed with exactly the right level of warmth and professionalism. These are real skills. They were just not the ones she needed in a Malibu compound with 40 strangers and no mute button. "You're not bad at social interaction," Diane said. "You're bilingual in a room full of people who only speak one language. The problem is the language you learned isn't the one they're speaking anymore." Maya started crying. Not the pretty crying you do in movies. The ugly kind. The kind where your nose runs and you cannot talk, and you're suddenly aware that you are repaying someone 180 an hour to watch you fall apart. "I thought I was broken," she said. "You're not broken," Diane said. "You're just under-rehearsed. Here's a statistic that should make you furious. According to a 2025 report from the Society for Human Resource Management, 35% of hybrid workers report feeling frequently lonely at work. That's higher than fully remote workers. Think about that. People who go into an office, who see other humans, who eat lunch near other humans, who sit in conference rooms with other humans, are more likely to feel chronically lonely than people who never leave their apartments. Presence without connection isn't neutral. It's corrosive. You know that feeling. You've lived it. You walk into the office on Tuesday. Someone says, "How was your weekend?" while filling their water bottle. You say, "Good, you?" They're already walking away. You're already forgotten. You go to the networking event. You hand over your business card. You make eye contact. You ask the questions you're supposed to ask. You leave with 7 new LinkedIn connections and the distinct sense that none of them will remember you tomorrow. You go on the date. It's fine. It's pleasant. It's 2 people performing interest at each other for 90 minutes. You both know the choreography. You both execute it competently. You both go home and wait for a text that may or may not arrive. This is the performance intimacy gap. It asks the distance between what you retrain to do and what your nervous system actually needs, and it's getting wider every year. Let me tell you about Maya's voicemail. She found it in March 2025. She was cleaning out her iCloud storage, the dreaded, almost full notification, and came across an old voice memo from 2019. She pressed play. It was her, leaving a rambling message for a friend. No script, no editing. She was laughing at something she'd forgotten. She interrupted herself twice. She mispronounced a word and kept going. She said 8 times in 47 seconds. She sounded like a person who wasn't worried about sounding like a person. She listened to it 3 times. Then she recorded a voice note for her current friend group. The 2025 version of her, the optimized one, the one who edits her texts before sending and deletes half her voice notes without finishing them. She listened to them back to back. The 2019, Maya, warm, messy, unpolished, magnetic. The 2025 Maya, smooth, calibrated, competent, forgettable. She didn't lose her charisma. She just buried it under 5 years of performance optimization. Here's what the charisma industry doesn't tell you. Have you ever felt like you're playing a character in your own life? Like you're constantly on stage, delivering lines you think people want to hear? I used to feel that way all the time. My name is Maya, and for most of my life I was a professional performer, just not on a stage. My stage was everywhere, at work, with friends, even sometimes with family. It started subtly. I was the easygoing friend, the one who was always up for anything, never complained, and always had a smile plastered on her face. At work, I was the super competent employee, the one who said yes to every project, stayed late without a peep, and laughed at jokes that weren't even funny. I built this entire identity based on what I thought would make me likable, successful, and accepted. I was a chameleon, changing my colors to blend into any social environment. And for a while, it worked. People liked me. I got promotions. On the outside, everything looked perfect. But on the inside, I was exhausted. It takes an incredible amount of energy to constantly monitor yourself, to filter your thoughts, to bite back your real opinions, and to perform happiness when you're feeling anything but. I'd come home at the end of the day feeling completely drained, like a battery that had been run down to 0. I'd sit in silence and this weird, hollow feeling would creep in. Who was I, really, underneath all these layers of performance? I had no idea. The turning point came during a weekend trip with some friends. We were sitting around a campfire, and everyone was sharing stories. Deep, personal, sometimes messy stories. When it was my turn, I did what I always did. I told a light, funny, and completely superficial anecdote. It landed well. Everyone laughed. But then one of my closest friends looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Maya, that's a great story, but what's really going on with you?" And I just froze. It was like a spotlight had been shone on the real me, the one hiding behind the curtain, and I had no lines prepared. For the first time, I couldn't perform. And in that moment of silence, something broke. The dam I had so carefully constructed for years finally cracked, and I started to cry. Not pretty, delicate tears, but messy, ugly sobs. I told them everything about the pressure, the exhaustion, the feeling of being an imposter in my own life. I expected them to be weirded out, to see me as weak or dramatic, but they didn't. They listened. They shared their own insecurities. They told me they loved me for me, not for the easygoing character I played. That night, under the stars, was the first time in a very long time that I felt genuinely seen. It was terrifying, and it was liberating. That was the beginning of my unlearning journey. I realized that my performance wasn't protecting me. It was isolating me. It was preventing me from forming real, deep connections with people. So, I decided to quit. Not my job, but my role as the perfect, easygoing chameleon. The first step was just paying attention. I started to notice when the urge to perform would kick in. It was usually in situations where I felt insecure or wanted to impress someone. A meeting with my boss, a first date, a party where I didn't know many people. In those moments, instead of immediately jumping into my old role, I would pause. I'd take a deep breath and ask myself, what do I actually think? What do I actually want to say? It was so hard at first. I remember being in a team meeting where everyone was agreeing with an idea I thought was terrible. The old Maya would have just nodded along, smiling, but the new Maya, heart pounding, raised her hand. I said, I respectfully disagree, and here's why. My voice was a little shaky, but I said it. The world didn't end. My boss didn't fire me. In fact, he listened, and we ended up having a constructive debate that led to a much better solution. It felt like a superpower. Saying no was another huge challenge. I had a reputation for being the person who would always help, always say yes. So when a coworker asked me to take on an extra task when my plate was already overflowing, I felt that familiar pull to just agree. Instead, I took a breath and said, I'd love to help, but I'm at my absolute capacity right now. I just can't take on anything else. He just said, oh, okay, no problem. I'll ask someone else. That was it. All the drama I had built up in my head about him being angry or thinking I was lazy, it was all just in my head. This journey of unlearning also meant getting comfortable with being disliked. As a performer, my main goal was universal approval. But as an authentic person, I had to accept that not everyone is going to like my real opinions, my real boundaries, or my real personality. And that's okay. The people who are meant to be in your life will appreciate the real you, not the curated version. My circle of friends might have gotten a little smaller, but the connections I have now are 1,000 times deeper and more meaningful. We talk about the hard stuff, the messy stuff, the real stuff. I also started rediscovering who Maya actually was. What did I like to do when no one was watching? I realized I'd been going to certain parties and events, not because I enjoyed them, but because I thought I should. I started spending my weekends differently. Instead of forcing myself to be social, I went hiking alone. I stayed home and read a book. I tried a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to do but was afraid I'd be bad at. And guess what? I was pretty bad at it, but I loved it. I was doing it for me, not for an audience. This process isn't about being rude or inconsiderate. It's about being honest. It's the difference between saying, your new haircut looks amazing, when you think it's just okay, and saying something more genuine like, wow, that's a big change. It's so bold. I love that you went for it. One is a performance, the other is an authentic connection. It's also important to remember that this is a practice, not a destination. There are still days when I feel the pull of my old habits. When I'm in a new social situation, the chameleon instinct can kick in. The difference is that now I recognize it. I can see the mask before I put it on, and I can make a conscious choice to set it aside. I can choose to be real, even if it feels a little scary. If any of this resonates with you, if you feel like you've been performing, please know that you're not alone. And know that it is possible to stop. Start small. Notice the moments when you feel yourself slipping into a role. Ask yourself what you're afraid of. For me, it was the fear of not being liked, of being rejected. But what I discovered is that the cost of performing was far greater. I was rejecting myself. True belonging doesn't come from being a perfect, flawless version of what you think others want. It comes from showing up as you are, imperfections and all, and allowing yourself to be truly seen. The connections you build on that foundation of authenticity are the ones that will actually nourish you. So here's my invitation to you. The next time you feel the urge to perform, just pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, what would the real me do or say right now? It might be the scariest question you can ask, but it's also the one that will set you free. It's a journey, and it's not always easy, but unlearning the performance and embracing your authentic self is the most rewarding work you'll ever do. Thanks for listening to my story. If this helped you, I'd love it if you'd subscribe for more conversations like this. See you next time. Have you ever felt like you're on stage during a first date? You've got your lines rehearsed, your best stories polished, and your smile dialed up to 11. That was Maya. For her, every first date was a performance, a carefully choreographed show designed to win a second one. She was a star student of what you might call the charisma industry. All those books, podcasts, and coaches promising to make you irresistible. She knew how to lean in just right, how to ask engaging questions, and how to tell a self-deprecating joke that was actually a humble brag. But after a string of dates that felt more like job interviews, she was exhausted. The connections were superficial, fizzling out as soon as the performance ended. One evening, staring at another dating app match, a guy named Liam, she felt a wave of fatigue. She was tired of being interesting. She was just tired. So she decided to try an experiment. What if she just showed up? No script, no agenda, no performance. What if she allowed herself to be, for lack of a better word, a little bit boring? She called it her strategic boredom experiment. The strategy was simple. Don't try so hard. If there was a lull in the conversation, she wouldn't rush to fill it with a pre-planned anecdote. She would just let it be. So, Maya met Liam at a quiet coffee shop. The old Maya would have launched into a dazzling story about her recent trip or a witty observation about the café's decor. But the new Maya just smiled and said, "Hi, it's nice to meet you." The first few minutes were quiet, almost uncomfortably so. The silence hung in the air, and Maya had to physically fight the urge to fill it. Liam seemed a bit taken aback, probably used to the typical first date song and dance himself. He asked her about her day, and she gave a simple, honest answer. It was fine, a bit busy, but I'm glad to be here now. No embellishments, no drama. Then something strange happened. In the absence of performance, a real space opened up. Liam, not feeling the pressure to compete with a high-energy monologue, started to relax, too. He began talking about his passion for woodworking, not in a showy way, but with a quiet, genuine enthusiasm. He described the feel of the grain under his fingers, the smell of sawdust. Maya, not busy planning her next line, actually listened. She found herself genuinely curious, asking questions that weren't from a how to be a great conversationalist checklist. She asked him what kind of wood was his favorite, and why. The conversation flowed from there, meandering through topics organically. They talked about favorite childhood cartoons, the weirdest food they'd ever eaten, and their shared anxiety about parallel parking. There were still moments of silence, but they weren't awkward anymore. They were comfortable, like the pauses in a conversation between old friends. In one of these quiet moments, Liam looked at her and said, "You know, this is nice. It feels real." And Maya felt it too. For the first time, she wasn't playing a character. She was just Maya. And Liam wasn't just an audience member. He was Liam. They weren't two performers trying to impress each other. They were two people getting to know each other. She realized the charisma industry had sold her a lie. It taught her that connection was something to be won, a prize for the best performance. But genuine connection isn't about being impressive. It's about being present. That date with Liam turned into another, and then another. Her strategic boredoms experiment had an unexpected result. It led to the most exciting and authentic connection she'd ever had. The lesson here is powerful. We're so often told to sell ourselves, to build a personal brand, even in our love lives. But maybe the most charismatic thing you can do is to stop trying to be charismatic. Maybe the secret to a real connection is giving someone the gift of your quiet, unfiltered, and sometimes even boring presence. It's about having the courage to just be, and trusting that that is more than enough. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, give this video a like and subscribe for more content. See you next time. Here's what I need you to understand about this moment. This is what breakthrough looks like. Not fireworks, not revelation, just a slightly longer pause before you reach for your phone. Just one conversation where you forget to perform. This is where 95% of people quit. Because this moment, the moment after the date, the moment after the successful experiment, is when your brain starts negotiating with you. See? But here's the thing about the 5% who don't quit. They know that one successful experiment doesn't change 5 years of conditioning. They know that their nervous system is still calibrated for threat detection, not connection. They know that the default mode, the scanning, the performing, the optimizing, will reassert itself the moment they stop paying attention. The 5% don't quit because they know the war isn't over. Here's what I need you to take from this story. The first break isn't dramatic. It's not a TED Talk moment. It's not the part in the movie where the protagonist has their epiphany, and the music swells and everything suddenly makes sense. But here's what the 5% know that the 95% don't. That clumsiness isn't failure, it's withdrawal. You're detoxing from performative sociality. Of course it feels wrong. Of course you want to go back to the highway. This is where 95% of people quit. They try strategic boredom once. It feels awkward. They convince themselves it didn't work, or that it only worked because of luck, or that they'll try again later when they're more ready. Later never comes. But you're not the 95%. You're the one who stays quiet and watches what emerges. You're the one who puts the phone down and survives the silence. You're the one who sends the unedited text and doesn't immediately regret it. The question isn't whether you can do it once. The question is whether you can do it again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. See you in part 4.